Boom. Hello, Hoopheads. Welcome to the weekly Hoopla, where I break down the need-to-know news in the NBA. I'm Bethke, your host, as do usual. Thank you again for coming in and joining a little Hoopla with me. If you could, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, give us a little bit of play, you know what I mean? Tit for tat. I give you content, you give me engagement. This is how we work. All right. Corporate stuff out of the way. We're doing tiers this week, friends. We're not getting into any of the minutia. I don't care about any of the little documentaries coming out, all of the fights that have been going on, the little mini dramas of the NBA season. We're putting all of that on pause. And right now we're just looking at all 30 teams on a tiers, on my former tiers rankings from the past. I kind of have played with those as I've gotten rid of some naturally that don't necessarily need to exist anymore. And now we just have 5 main tiers. This would be contenders on pace. This would be contenders if. This would be the danger zone. And then your mid, obviously, that's always going to exist in any sports. And of course, your better luck next year teams, the teams that can probably already go ahead and start looking on to the 24-25 season. But without any further delay, let's get to our first team, the Boston Celtics. Contender on pace for me, as they have been all season, 45-12. Eastern Conference's best team throughout most of the season, 9-1 in the last 10. As you can see, everybody's been healthy. Kristaps Porzingis has had a few here and there, a couple injuries that'll scare you, but every time he's come back, he's looked good. I guess the sad part of when we're expecting a team to be this good is that we don't appreciate it until we realize how good they are in the playoffs. Because a lot of times we've seen teams like this just not be able to perform in that position. And we've seen this particular group, well, not this exact group, but most of this group have these issues in the last few years. So naturally, everyone's going to be a little bullish on what the Celtics regular season looks like, good or bad. So here we are. Kind of everything's on pace. There's really nothing here that I can nitpick over. I have a couple of questions. Each team I'm going to break down. I'm going to give you guys something to look for moving forward, since there's not a lot here, thankfully, on the health side, on the drama side, on the rotation side. We really don't have a lot of questions. It's more about, will this team perform or not? Is Mazzulla ready or not as a young coach thrusted into the limelight? Are Tatum and Brown actually meant to play together, or are we still just forcing a situation because two guys like each other? All of these questions will get answered in the playoffs. They can't be answered right now. They passed the trade deadline test. They have an active roster spot if they want to find somebody at the buyout market that makes sense for them. So I really, really don't have any negatives to say about the Boston Celtics, other than the things they can't really do anything about right now. So I'll finish this off with my something to look forward to here. How deep will this group actually go? So right now you got Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Derek White, Al Horford, right? You got 6 guys that I know I can trust and I will use if they're healthy. Peyton Pritchard, I think he's earned that right. Now my question is Xavier Tillman or Luke Cornett, Jaden Springer, Sam Hauser, O'Shea Brissett, maybe even in these. So I have all these options. I like what Brad did with the options. I'm just not sure who I trust still. So not that that's a problem that isn't uncommon here. It's just essentially the only real story to look for. I don't think Tatum's going to get into the MVP conversations. I don't think that we're going to have anything else really to watch too carefully about this group with. I mean, maybe the Tatum MVP conversation kicks up into gear as we close out the season, but even that I still have a pretty big doubt for. So Celtics are on pace, and there's not much more we can say about it. Moving on to my last member of the contenders on pace tier, and this is a difficult tier to get into because I have to have some level of trust in you, at least for what the Celtics are doing. I know what this is. I know how talented it is. It's shown me that mostly. I just need to see all the other things they can't prove to me right now. For the Denver Nuggets, it's very similar. They've been neutral in here this whole season. Obviously, I usually am one to trust the defending champions as much as I can, especially when they run a team back. And in this situation, they basically have as best as they could. Obviously, there's a little bit of difference here. You're asking Reggie Jackson to do more than on the last team. You don't have the Bruce Brown piece. You didn't really get to see a big leap from Zeke Naji. Julian Strother is all right, but maybe not the playoff caliber player right away. Some of these other guys you have on the roster, they might still be in these issues moving forward too, right? I don't think my notes are correct here, but even Hunter Tyson was a guy we were excited about in Summer League, and now I think he's hurt, done for the season. Not that he was even close to being a part of the rotation yet, but, adding that to the Vlatko Konchar injury to start the season, and here we are. You're a thin team, even if you are the defending champions. And even if we have seen Peyton Watson take a massive leap, we're not sure that he's got what it takes to completely replace Jeff Green from last year, because Jeff Green comes with a lot more than just the physical presence of Jeff Green, which I think Peyton Watson can actually replicate. Not much of a thing here to break into of the good and the bad. They're performing well. It's a competitive West. It's a lot of young teams. There's nothing really concerning about them being 6-4 in the last 10. There's nothing concerning about them being the Western Conference 4 seed, especially right now when it's still very attainable to get the first seed if they play well enough. So I'm really not too concerned with any of that stuff. Where my concern does come in is obviously Jamal Murray and the injuries. The inflammation stuff is still a topic of conversation. They're lucky enough to be able to sit him out tonight. I'm recording this Sunday as the first games have already started. I don't know what's going on in those yet. But essentially, you're looking at a team that, they're going to have to try to win as many games as handily as they can so that they're not putting as much wear and tear on Jamal, so that when the playoffs get here, that you have your second all-star, unofficial all-star, or whatever he wants to be called, you have that level of play that is what brought them a title. So ultimately, Nikola is doing everything he can. He's probably an MVP candidate again, or finalist again. He's definitely a candidate, probably a finalist again this year, if not the winner. Nothing. Like I said, it's pretty much the same situation here. We're just looking to see who they draw and how healthy they are by the time they get to the playoffs. Even who they draw doesn't necessarily matter. It just could force their path to be a bit difficult compared to last year, or a bit more difficult compared to last year. Not to discredit, just to say it could be a little bit more of an onslaught this season, even as hard as last season was. So last thing I was going to kind of talk about here, I thought there was a really fun Bill Walton quote coming out talking about Nikola. He plays with purpose. He plays to win games. He does it with a beautiful style, grace, dignity, and professionalism. Nikola represents the conquest of substance over hype. I don't want to go into the backhanded nature of why some of this stuff might get misconstrued. That's unfortunate. I think for me, I just am really excited to hear Bill Walton's crazy but beautiful way with words. And I completely agree with that that conquest of substance over hype. Again, I don't care about the American versus European thing. I'm not trying to do all of that. I'm just trying to look at a problem with basketball and a problem with, or at least a stunting of growth with basketball, and how we could be better if we held ourselves accountable to these standards. And having Nikola represent this for the NBA is an important thing, not just for European players, but for the future of American players, because they're going to have to move to his standard now, to Luka's standard, if Luka can find a way to be better about the things that Nikola's great at. It just makes our players better at the end of the day. And I know that this is going to get into a nasty bit of, back and forth before we get there probably, but that's just the reality. He also is he's the third guy to have a triple-double against every basketball team. I don't know where Russell Westbrook stands on that, but it's just LeBron and Oscar Robertson at this point. But it feels like Russell Westbrook should be able to do that, right? I mean, unless he's missing the Clippers, because he's probably going to be a Clipper until he retires. But anyway, something to look forward to. Again, Jamal Murray's minutes. The Nugs cannot win enough games handedly enough. They cannot afford to need games going into back-to-backs against bad teams, any of that stuff. They've got to capitalize on every single moment they can get Jamal Murray off the basketball court. That's just unfortunate reality of his situation. Moving into our second tier, our Contenders If category. We have quite a few here. A lot of people that are, learning the meaning to if wishes were dishes, we'd all be well served. I think that some of these teams' ifs are bigger than others. I'll let you decide really on that. But all of these teams, in my opinion, have a pretty big if when it comes to their title contention, despite their record, performance, whatever. Minnesota obviously is a good indicator and a good place to start. 40-17, first in the West, 7-3 in the last 10. Had a tough loss the other night on national television to the Bucks, but that was a game Bucks absolutely needed to win. So it's not too bad, I think that for me, not trusting this team still comes with the Rudy Gobert thing. It still comes with the probably having two big guys, limited big guys, but limited in weird ways. And then still not knowing that I trust the extra parts around it to make the whole thing elevate consistently enough, especially at the next level, or the next stage of the season in the playoffs. They've done all they can do. They've made a sensible trade to get Monte Morris to add that point guard depth. But I'm still just a little scared. They re-signed Mike Conley to make sure he's a part of this thing. They've put together a great performance as far as the front office goes of giving this team a chance to win. We really thought that Karl-Anthony Towns versus Anthony Edwards for the future of this roster would be a conversation this season, and it really has not been, unless you're forcing it, So I think that's really the win for the Timberwolves this season, but it's still what's at stake. It's still in the playoffs. This all could change, and that issue could rear its ugly head. For me, that's not where I stand on Minnesota alone. My something to look at doesn't necessarily have to do with Carl and Ant, even though I think we're all going to be looking at that. Doesn't necessarily have to do with Rudy, but we are all looking at that. It's about Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Monte Morris and their ability to shoot the basketball. I think if those guys can consistently shoot, especially Nickeil, that is the X factor that the Timberwolves could use to actually propel themselves into a Western Conference Finals run, maybe a Finals run. Still kind of hard to believe that this is a title winner right now, but to make a real run and to establish what the future will be, this season is a great opportunity. And I think a lot of that hinges on Nickeil, especially because he's such a lengthy player. He's such a decent, when he's shooting well, it looks really nice. It looks like the kind of guy you want out there, the prototype. But the consistency is still not a perfect thing there. And he'll have to be the consistent answer for the spacing concerns, for the defensive concerns. With Monte and Nickeil, they bring very useful contributions, counter Mike Conley. If it's, not spelling Conley, like Morris and Conley probably aren't going to be on together too often, even as big as a team that is, because they sort of just are the same player in a lot of ways, or similar enough players in a lot of ways, to where you're just giving yourself 48 minutes of that kind of point guard play if you need it. But a little bit of combo stuff there with Monte when he can shoot. It has not been consistent in his career. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for those two parts to be a little bit more elevated. Again, I still think maybe this is a team that just needs to establish what it is, not let down a first round, being the number one seed and losing would be that would be the complete opposite way you would want this dream season to go for the Timberwolves. So pretty much everything outside of that feels like a win to me. And I think this is on pace for it. It's just, I question a couple things here, and I don't know I can trust a couple things, and that's what we're going to look for. Similar group, Oklahoma City. They are 39-17. They're the Western Conference's 2 seed at the moment. They're 7-3 in their last 10. They're very talented. They got better at the deadline. I think they're still a little early on how much I want to give them the credit for what they can do. Contending for this title with so much youth feels very, very difficult to me. But again, Western Conference Finals, NBA Finals. These are the ways, these are the stepping stones to building a dynasty or building at least a title winner, is getting close to it, is understanding that you're capable of getting there, but that you have to do more and then doing more eventually. The doing more part comes later. This part is just showing us what you are. I think there are a couple of things to look at. Obviously, Gordon Hayward and Bismack Biyombo, I think, were very smart ways to not mortgage any of the large asset pool you have, whether it be players or picks, and bringing yourself something that plugs in exactly with what you need for this group to not stunt their growth, but to help aid their growth. And I think that it was a great call to go ahead and move on from Pokusevski. I think that we're looking at it with Trey Mann and Vasily Micic with the Hornets, where I think the Thunder just had too many good players, and the league needs them to come off a couple of these dudes. And I don't know if Poku's going to be a good player. I don't know if he'll just go to Serbia. I don't know what his future is. But when you clearly know that a guy isn't for this team, I just like that you're getting them moved on, and it just flows with the roster better, because now I can look at the construction of this group and I can tell that there's not as many people fighting for minutes, not as many people fighting for their futures, and now we can build this as a group. That being said, my one thing to look for is going to hinge on Josh Giddey. I think that not only the long, I guess a lot of that controversy has died down at this point, but not all of that matters to me right now. What matters to me in the Giddey experiment is the 6-man role. Can he jump from the 6-man role? Can I put Aaron Wiggins in to start? Can I use Cason Wallace, Isaiah Joe, Gordon Hayward? I like all of these guys as auxiliary players to what I have with the young big three of SGA, Chet, and Jalen Williams. I have a lot of love for what that looks like, and especially this season, for it to be competent enough to win right now, at least a couple of rounds. But I don't think Giddey being in the starting role does that for a lot of reasons. I think his efficiency in his game needs to come a long way. I don't know if that's maturity. I don't know what all of that could be. You can speculate. Obviously, shooting is a part of it. It's just one of those things where I think he's a talented player. I think that he isn't the most prototypical 6-man that we think of. The more your Cam Thomases, that I think a lot of people really circle as him as being a guy who could be a great 6-man for a decade or so. I think Giddey's sneaky there too, with the shooting kind of keeping him from being a high impact starter. I think then, his basketball IQ, his size, I think that really allows you to extend your bench and play 48 minutes of tough basketball every night. That feels better to me. And it also feels like it's, like I said at the trade deadline, this is an interesting prospect to move somewhere else and maybe add something to this group in the offseason. So that's my big thing to look for. Josh Giddey as a 6-man. Does it give them even more power moving into the final part of the season? Contenders if. Cleveland Cavaliers. 36-19, Eastern Conference's second seed, 7-3 in the last 10. This is a team that I had in the mid category for quite a bit of this year. Really didn't think that there was any reason for them to earn a promotion, and then I had to handle all of the transaction rumors and crap like that for 2 months, basically. And in that time, they became one of the best teams in basketball. It's been an easier road, sure, but the drama that they kind of were going through with the trade stuff, with the 2 injuries to the key players, I think all of those things could have ruined a lot of worse teams, a lot of worse ran franchises, and it didn't in this situation. They're healthy now. I think they're still a little bit short on players, but I think if they're playing their best basketball right now, Donovan looks as good as he's looked in his career. I certainly feel like there's no reason not to give Cleveland this much respect while still looking at them like 2 of the teams I mentioned before, and a couple of teams I'll mention in this list as I go. I do think that the upside is there, that you're building towards the right thing. I just don't know that it's here in the moment. And that's just how it goes. Something to look forward to in this. Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, those guys' numbers on the defensive side when they're on the court together. I think that means a lot, not only for this team to move forward now, but is in the future, because I think we're talking a lot about Donovan Mitchell's future in Cleveland, when the reality is if Donovan Mitchell wants to take that, unless he just absolutely wants to leave, like absolutely has no desire to be there, it almost looks like we're heading more towards a situation where Darius Garland is moved for whatever piece needs to complement Mitchell, Allen, and Mobley. And that's where I think this offseason or this postseason could really start to foreshadow that. I trust Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell on offense. I think they're going to put up great numbers. And, of course, you have to kind of counter that out when you're making this decision. But ultimately, if the defensive numbers are so atrocious after, essentially 2 seasons of this experiment, not a perfect 2 seasons, but essentially 2 seasons of it, I think that does cause the Cleveland Cavaliers to make a rash decision that would likely be to preserving Donovan Mitchell being a Cavalier for the long haul. They gave up a lot to get him. Darius Garland's a really talented player. If they're just doubling up at that position, then it makes sense for them to use Garland as a way to get better in a different position. All right. Contender if. The LA Clippers, not the Los Angeles Clippers. They do not want to be called the Los Angeles Clippers. They're trying to differentiate themselves. And they have in a lot of ways. We've talked about that on the Hoopla as the season's gone. Thankfully, I didn't do this tier ranking when this team first got to put together. So you never really got any tape you could throw back at me on shitting on these guys because they've been really great since that awful start. They're 37-18. They're the Western Conference 3rd seed at the moment. They're 7-3 over the last 10 games. I think there's some people that would argue a promotion to contenders on pace at this point, but I have a pretty big disagreement with that. I think that the LA Clippers are probably the best group out of this tier, perhaps, but I still feel very, very, very I feel it very, very hard to put them on the same level as the Nuggets and the Celtics. And a lot of that hinges on the fact that time and time again, no matter how good this team has looked, and it has, I see a team that looks like it can get bullied against bigger groups. Why is that concerning? Well, the entire West is big. I mean, with Denver, you get, you go Minnesota, it's literally the biggest team in basketball. Then you have Oklahoma City, who's got Chet Holmgren in this absolutely just beautiful future at the 5 position. Then you have and some mediocre depth. Biyombo helps them. It's not crazy good depth, but just the Chet Holmgren piece alone is incredible. They're the 3 seed. Then you have the 4th seed is the Nuggets. I mean, I know the Nuggets necessarily the rim protection thing isn't always their strong suit, but when it comes to being a big, sizable team with Gordon and with Nikola, it's still quite a big team. KCP's a long guy. Michael Porter Jr. is a long guy. So that is a pretty long, big team when you look at it too. You have the same situation throughout. Ultimately you have a couple of teams, the Warriors, but then they can hit you with a different version of basketball. The Mavericks just got much bigger, as we'll talk about. The Lakers, they may be a goofy ass team for a lot of reasons. They still have Anthony Davis. This is an interesting concern, I think, and it's a real one for the LA Clippers. And they can't do a lot about it. I think that Mason Plumlee, Ivica Zubac, and Daniel Tice are a decent threesome to have. You have your PJ Tucker, Terrence Mann options, although we'll talk about one of those guys in a second. I just don't know that I can trust this small ball all wings and James Harden lineup, or James Harden or Russell Westbrook lineup to win a championship. I think I'm stuck here. And Amir Coffey's been such a good player for them. They have some useful talent that they weren't really able to consolidate to add one more player at the deadline. I thought that was a little frustrating. So yeah, I mean, Kawhi Leonard's playing his best basketball and he's healthy. That's the biggest win for the Clippers. But they didn't get the Paul George deal done. It doesn't look like they are at this point. We'll probably know by next week, I think. That's a big deal for the future of their team. The PJ, I guess we'll go ahead and talk about something I'm looking at, not only with the Paul George contract and pending free agency, the PJ Tucker drama. I do wonder if either one of those bleeds into the finish of the season, because you have put together a good team. You've risked it all, but this isn't bad. This is kind of fun. It's LA our way. It's 4 guys from the county. You're moving to Inglewood. This is a great time to get into the Lakers, especially with the kind of drama they're going through. It just still feels like perhaps when building this group, there was too much being relied upon with Ivica Zubac and Mason Plumlee. Maybe I'm wrong, but it does feel like those were probably betting on the wrong combination of horses. We'll see. Contender If, the New York Knicks. About to hit a couple of teams that aren't too good right now, but I'm still going to stay stubborn with them because I think their outside chance is still pretty good. Now, the Knicks are 34-23. They're the 4th seed in the East, and they're 4-6 in their last 10 games. That's not ideal. Julius Randle, OG Anunoby, and Mitchell Robinson have all been out for an extended period of time. This group started in my in need of change group because they were kind of just mid, and we knew that they needed something else. It's time to push these chips in. They do so for the OG trade. It looks amazing, and then OG and Randle get hurt. And now Jalen Brunson's deadlifting a roster, and then he gets hurt for a little bit, and then it's all started. Now all of a sudden we're just trying to get all these other guys together because we've added Bogdanovich. Now we've added who else did they have in that trade? You get Burks back, so you add a few pieces here. You're kind of doing a couple of 10-day contracts to fill out some of these roster spots. So it's one of those things where it's not the best time to really talk about how much you like the Knicks or how much you think they can do, but I still do a little bit. I think that this is a fun team. It's a good team. It's a grinder team, and it's a weak Eastern Conference. And I think there's even a couple of teams that could be due for a disappointing playoff run too. So for the Knicks, this is just staying the course. Can Jalen Brunson in this group keep themselves afloat, especially with the 3 best defenders essentially on your roster not playing for a while? What can you do to save this thing until you get at least 1 or 2 of these guys back? You do get OG Anunoby probably in 2 weeks, and then Mitchell Robinson and Randle sort of be a race for the finish line to see who actually comes back before the start of the playoffs. And again, that's my something to look for here. Will this team get healthy enough to actually have time to gel, or are they just going to have to put it together on the fly and hope that they get a good draw in a weak Eastern Conference in the first round? Because that's sort of the way it feels right now. My next contender if, the Philadelphia 76ers, 33-23, the Eastern Conference 5th seed, 4-6 in their last 10. It's not been looking pretty since the Joel Embiid news came down at this point a couple weeks back now, about almost a month ago. So most of my if was how they were going to use the Harden assets. Then when the JoJo injury happened, it became very clear that there was not a big enough splash to make the Harden trade really 1-for-1 work, or to make it to really put you into this position, because there's a very big uncertainty with what Joel will give you. Is there a couple of tweaks you can do to get healthy and make a run on this? I think with Kyle Lowry starting to come into this thing, I think maybe it helps you out a little bit here. You got some good play out of Ricky Council the fourth, out of a two-way contract. Maybe that's something real. You have a decent group here that you can probably run out different lineups with. You can get a little cute. I think Batum and Kyle Lowry at this point are going to be limited minutes restriction kind of guys. You don't have Covington either. So you're kind of just hoping Tobias Harris can get his stuff together. You're hoping Buddy Hield really is hoping to cement himself with the Philadelphia 76ers moving forward. And then my biggest thing to look for, Tyrese Maxey's efficiency. He's a great player. We love him. South Garland, stand up. At the end of the day, though, this will be the guiding force to see what seed they get. Again, the East sucks. They have room to fall. If they fall even to the 10th seed, they'll probably still be stuck in the 10th seed because of the way the East works. Can the efficiency give them the best shot they have by the time a potential Embiid return could happen? And then this team can make some noise, and then they have all the money and they have all the ability to go into next offseason as potentially one of the bigger players in free agency or in just the offseason in general, however they get creative. Ball hard Dallas Mavericks. All right. We get the last contender if of this tier. We get 33 and 23, the Western Conference 6 seed. Doesn't sound amazing, but this is a recent uptick, as you can tell by the 8 and 2 in the last 10. I had this team listed there for most of the season because I was very stubborn about their ability to push the chips in and bring in the kind of guys by the deadline that could give Luka and Kyrie their first real shot to go into the playoffs and do battle together. So I think they are. I think that makes me feel super confident, obviously, with the moves they made. I still don't exactly know how all of it will work when it comes to competing for the 24 title. I think Luka is definitely in the MVP conversation, if not on a trajectory to make himself the front runner within the next couple weeks. However, I still do struggle putting them as a true 2024 contender for the championship. I think that they have a lot of talent. I think that this is a 48 minutes of real NBA basketball players, like undeniable true blue NBA players. But I still do have a lot of questions about the level of guys they have. And if there isn't still some consolidation into the next season that'll need to happen for this team to be truly at that level and for a sustainable period of time. Dante Exum's health is a big part of the finish of the season here. It's kind of the last thing I feel like I need to see before we're all in on this team. I think that Exum provides quite a bit of good for the Mavericks, but I think he also can provide more consistency than some of the rest of the guards that they can play. And that's as much as an impact as it needs to be in the playoffs. So if he's truly going to come back and be healthy, now we're really talking about a deep group. I mean, Luka, Kyrie, I think Hardaway Jr. minutes need to probably come down with Exum coming up if he's healthy. But ultimately, him and Josh Green are still solid players. I'll count them in my lineup. I'm going to at least give them chances to play themselves out of playoff games. PJ Washington looks as good as advertised as a team player. Still would like to see him get better or more comfortable as a Maverick. Daniel Gafford's already who he is, and he looks comfortable with the Mavericks. And then Kleba gives you a lot of optionality. Derek Jones gives you a lot of length and optionality. And, of course, Derek Lively is sort of the linchpin behind this whole quick turnaround into building something real for the future. That leads me to my something to look forward to for the Dallas Mavericks. I think that Jason Kidd handling the bigs, I'm sure is not going to be a shock to any Maverick fans that I'm looking at Jason Kidd here. Lively's still learning. Gafford is limited. Kleba is all reliable, but he's also sort of for certain matchups only or certain matchups more than others. I have an interest in how they handle the bigs and how the minute lineups work. Does Derek Lively stay motivated, healthy, happy in these roles? Not that he's a malcontent for any reason, but just can he keep his head in the game as a young man, coming in so well, doing so hot, and then having injuries sort of make it obvious that the team needed to upgrade the position behind him. The guy he has behind him is also sort of a capable starter. So it really gives the Mavericks a lot of optionality in this season. Does everybody handle it professionally? I think they do, but it's always a question when it comes to the game of basketball. And in this league in particular, you can never be too sure that that's the situation. So that's where we leave the Contenders If, and we head to the danger zone. Oh, yeah, baby. You knew who was going to start off the danger zone. The Milwaukee Bucks, they're 36 and 21. They're the Eastern Conference 3 seed. They're 4 and 6 in their last 10 games. They've been the drama kings of the last couple weeks. Doc Rivers is going on a quote run that is truly one of the greatest runs of all time, depending on who you are a fan of course. And so I'm just going to be simple with my evaluation here. This is an old team. It's kind of deep now. You can convince me it's deep, but I don't love the consistency you've gotten out of these players. I think in theory, this roster looks better than the reality has. But for me, even if Doc was the right move and they hold a championship up at the end of this season, I just can't elevate them out of the danger zone. This dude just can't shut up. And then you make a move to bring in Pat Beverly, whose job it is to make Barstool money by talking shit. You know what I mean? Like that's a part of his job now. It's part of how his money and his bills get paid. And you can't not think about that. And that's an annoying thing to add to the pressure you have on this group. Regardless of how well he's playing this season, I don't care. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I don't mind. Doc Rivers is a danger zone guy all the time. He's winning a championship in the danger zone and he's losing it in the danger zone. That he stays there no matter what. My something to look forward to, even if they get this thing right, are they still too old? Does Chris Middleton's body break down? Do we have an issue with Patrick Beverly, Jay Crowder, Malik Beasley, Danilo Gallinari, to where any four of these guys becomes unplayable in a series? I don't think so necessarily, all four at least, but it certainly feels like there's a good chance that 3 out of the 4 maybe, or 2 out of the 4 for sure. That leaves you thin. That leaves you really thin. Even with guys like Pat Connaughton and Bobby Portis who can play great when they're not performing well offensively, that's still another thing you're overcompensating for. So defensively, they have to lock this thing up. It's their identity. Damian Lillard has to find a way to help this team do it. They have to help him, because once that happens, I think the scoring will come back to the clip it should be. And then you're looking at the true pick and roll partnership that we all thought could be a slam dunk when these guys got together. Of course, that we'll still see. Moving into the danger zone, team number 2, the Miami Heat. Probably my least scary of the team in the least dangerous position. Probably the closest to being relieved of being in the danger zone, though I have said before, and I will continue to say, once you're in the danger zone, it's very difficult to get out. This team's 31-25, Eastern Conference 8th seed. They're 7-3 in their last 10. Things looked really bad for a second there. There was a 7-game losing streak. After a trade, you think things are fixed, and then it just gets worse. Now Rozier's injured. Josh Richardson's injured. Tyler Hero might be really injured. I don't know. I'm just at this point, we're just terrified of anything at this point in this late in the season. So there's a lot of reason to be still a little scared, even though things are ticking back up the way they should. A scuffle against the Pelicans this past week also might mean some guys get suspended amidst all of this stuff. It sort of feels like here we go again with the Miami Heat. Like we keep talking about it, and this just keeps. So you just keep walking back into the same path with these guys. So my something to look for should be pretty obvious here. Are Jimmy and Butler and Bam Adebayo about to just do what they keep doing and just they're healthy right now? They're really good. So then their greatness is just going to lead whatever group they have into the playoff, play-in, whatever. And and then all of a sudden they're, Rozier's healthy, Richardson's healthy, Hero's healthy, and now you've just got this full complement to go out there and try to give it your best. It feels like we're heading for that same thing again. But again, danger zone, I feel it's necessary. I still feel it's very necessary here because these injuries are significant. If Rozier looks as good as he's been looking in his little, all the little clips the beat writers and stuff will put on Twitter, if he's continued to be well and he'll get back soon. Richardson's not due back for about a month, so that's fine, but he's more of a defensive player anyway. I'm not too concerned if his shot sucks. It's Hero. I need Hero to be the scorer here. I need that as well as what I have with adding DeLon Wright, adding Terry Rozier. I need Tyler Hero at his best. Moving into the Phoenix Suns, almost out of the danger zone. They were almost out of the danger zone this week as well. But I just can't. I can't shake the danger zone, especially you give up a lead against the Rockets where you should be able to win after taking a tough loss to the Mavericks. I think that was to kick off your post-All-Star break, not ideal. They're 33-24. They're the 8th seed right now. They're 6-4 in their last 10. Brad Beal's out again for a little bit. He's kind of healing up a couple things on his body. So it's kind of hard to give you an exact thing going on there, but there's a few things that it's basically just general rest is how I would sum it up. They can't play a lick of defense, but damn, when they're on, they're one of the biggest flamethrower teams ever. Royce O'Neal is been such a perfect addition to this group offensively. But again, I still worry. Even Bol, they're getting use out of Bol. Like Bol might be a playoff rotation guy. I don't know if that's amazing for them or absolutely terrifying. That's why the danger zone exists. So my thing to look forward to as the season finishes is team chemistry. This team has precious little of it, and I love Kevin Durant. I'm not a Durant hater, but his answers to questions, his general disposition is a little more interesting as it goes. Winning cures all. Health cures a lot of it too. I'm not writing this team out, but this is why the danger zone exists. Is I can't trust a team with this little team chemistry. I can't still hear your coach talking about how you're losing games, getting lost into ISO ball, because it's like, obviously this team's going to get lost in ISO ball. How could this team not get lost in it? It's built to get lost in ISO ball. So yeah, I have a little bit of, I have a little concern, even though I still understand the talent's amazing. The new ownership groups, they're trying their hardest to get this team where it needs to be. Durant's healthy, Booker's healthy. They're playing well. It's just tough. It's just very tough to get there. The same with this next team. The Los Angeles Lakers. I think basically most of the season they started as a contender if, and it was pretty much, do you get a healthy LeBron and AD? And you did. You have, for the most part. Hadn't had a lot of health elsewhere, though. They're 31-27. Their Western Conference is 9th seed. They're 7-3 in their last 10. But at the moment, they're still missing Gabe Vincent, who's basically been a nothing burger this season. Jared Vanderbilt, who's been outstanding in his little bit of time he did play in the season, but missed most of the start of the season and now is missing the bulk of the rest of the season with injuries. And Cam Reddish, who actually looked like he had salvaged his career to some extent with the Lakers, has just been dropped off the face of the map for about a month or so for an injury. Adding on to that, we get a random report during the middle of the All-Star weekend about an injury to Christian Wood. Somehow. Where does this come from? I don't know. But it's still impressive because now you have this freaking video that comes out, and it doesn't look good for Christian Wood. You can find the video. It's type in Christian Wood's shovel, and you'll probably find it. It's a terrible look right now, and this is why the concern for the Lakers always exists. It's not just Darvin Ham. It's not just the roster building. It's not just the could LeBron leave. It's the fact that it's all of it. It's you drafted Jalen Hood-Schifino when the whole world kind of knew you had a better prospect on the board, and there's no real that confused a lot of people, and it still confuses a lot of people as you're struggling to find the depth of roster that you could have had. I think that makes the thing that you have to look for is LeBron's general disposition as this goes. D'Angelo Russell, also, I think it's important for him not to lose any of the steam. I should mention that they added the Spencer Dinwiddie thing. It hasn't looked amazing to start, though I would say Mavs fans probably not the best time to start running victory laps 2 games in, because they have brought him in to be an option. He's not really the option or a option, but he could be a option, the option. That's why he chose there. Either way, it doesn't matter. I'm just saying 2 games is a weird way to start running victory laps. But it adds another layer of boom or bust to this group, and that's why it's such a danger zone group. It's just such a spontaneous group where I like it when it's playing its best and it's healthy. But when it's not, I certainly can never write off this team's ability to just lose 5 games in a row or something crazy. Danger zone almost winding down. The Chicago Bulls, probably the kings of the danger zone this season. The Mad Lads did it. They started in my need of change category to start this season, and they stayed the course the entire year. They never made a move. They claimed the owner's okay with blowing it up, but that they just wanted to keep this group around. Does that make them the NBA's Dallas Cowboys? You decide. Now you don't get Patrick Williams for the rest of the season. He's done. So now you have Zach LaVine, Lonzo Ball, Patrick Williams, 3 of the most important parts of this thing that you were building, just gone. Torrey Craig, a very useful player, gone most of the season as well. You've been pretty good, though, despite it. I mean, 26-30, Eastern Conference 9th seed's not the best, but it's not the worst either. It's a bad conference, too. So, as frustrating as it was that they didn't pull the trigger on any moves that could have helped this team in the future build towards a better Chicago tomorrow, they've doubled down and they continue to double down. I think that you kind of just look at this team and you say, okay, will they make some noise once they get into the play-in, being a little healthier, being a little bit more of an interesting veteran group than just your typical bad or mediocre team? Will they just get in by default and get rolled over? And then we're talking about another super disappointing and embarrassing season that they essentially just chalk up to the injuries. Yeah, it's a troublesome time for Chicago fans is the long story short on that. Golden State Warriors, I think, also another team that definitely has a good chance of getting out of this tier by the end of the season. They're 29-26, so they're Western Conference 10th seed right now, but they are 8-2 in their last 10. I will say it hasn't been the hardest 10 in the world, but you took your 10 and you got your 8 wins out of it. They didn't really trade anybody at the deadline. In fact, Draymond's suspension really helped some of the kids grow up a lot faster than we expected. And then, of course, something as tragic as what they went through certainly could make or break a group. And it feels like this one is one of those times where it's made a group. This looks like a much better team, a much more cohesive team, a much more fun team. There's things like Klay Thompson coming off the bench for a rookie. That's not something we would have predicted to start this season. Even Trace Jackson-Davis playing more than Kayvon Looney. I think there's just a real effort to put the best 48 minutes of basketball on the court every night and stop playing the politics. And it's worked really well. Unfortunately, I do think the last part that they need will need to look forward to and that they need to sort of answer is, what will Chris Paul's return look like to this group? Will it hurt? Will it hinder? I kind of have my bets on the helping side of it, because I think they'll bring Chris on slow. I don't think he'll really interrupt a lot of things to begin with, and then they could just build off of that. But of course, there is a lot of fairness to say that this could end up throwing off a lot of what they built, because Chris will come back and want to be a big part of it if they feel like they're even better. And I mean, they're the 10th seed right now, but they certainly could climb themselves out of the play-in with the way the West works right now. So it's just interesting to look at. Still a danger zone team. Still a lot of combustible people on that team. A lot of people in different versions of their career. Steve Kerr did get a contract extension, I should note. So things are mostly looking normal again in Golden State. Where they're looking normal, sadly, is the Brooklyn Nets. They are 21-35. They're the Eastern Conference 11th seed. They're 2-8 in their last 8 games. And I was respectful about how mid Brooklyn was until it was a little too mid. And then the team's rumored prices around their players started making me really worry about who's running this group. And then they fired their coach and they got worse. Oh, and Ben Simmons might be hurt again. Oh, and Mikal Bridges likes to go and talk about how crappy the arena is and the fan base is. So yeah, this isn't even more of it. This is honestly might as well be better like next year danger zone, like tie-in, because this is not great. Might something to look forward to, because I'm not even going to spend a lot of time on this disaster. Besides the fact that the Cook brothers could eventually own part of this team, or we're a full part of another team, or Cook brothers rather. Is Ben Simmons really done? I didn't think he was ever going to be an all-star again, but I thought, hey, maybe you can get a decent starter, defensive player, a defensive team guy, but this is incredible. I mean, this is notable in a bad way, because now this could really plunge this team. I mean, just the motivation and the effort and the helplessness of seeing Ben being injured again. I imagine that's probably taken some of the toll on this group. But we'll move on. There's not much to say, and we're moving into the mid. Now, this is going to be a controversial category, as you can already see by my first team here. New Orleans Pelicans are 34-23. They're Western Conference 5th seed. They're 8-10, and they're 8-2 in their last 10. Why? Why do I call them mid? Well, unfortunately, folks, this is just the way basketball works. You got a good group here. They're young as hell. You got 2 young scorers. but you got two guys that I don't think are leaders defensively, and you got a lot of other guys who don't exactly make me feel like they're great defenders either, other than the obvious with Herb Jones, and Trey Murphy's been a really nice defender at times. Dyson Daniels, I think, has an interesting future as a defender, even though he's hurt at the moment. I think this is just clearly a group to me that has a lot of talent and a great future. But when we get here, their firepower at the top of their team isn't there. I don't trust Zion every night. I don't trust Brandon every night. That's why they're not the contenders if, even if they are still sort of like the Oklahoma City Thunder or the Minnesota Timberwolves or whoever, or whoever's older or whoever's a little ahead of schedule. But they're still here. They're an interesting team. I think that the thing I'm looking for is how well do they finish, because they can go from being an annoying lower seed to being potentially a paper giant that kind of, that gets a little bit ahead of where they're at and gets one of these really talented, experienced groups to come in and be their lower seed in an unfortunate seeding situation, or they could just fall out of this whole thing altogether because it's that tight and it doesn't take much. Right now, obviously, that doesn't look possible or doesn't look super likely, but it's one of those things with the New Orleans Pelicans that I have to keep my eye on. The consistency, it's not the Stephen A. crap about Zion's fat, blah, blah, blah. No, Zion just is a young, talented player, and he's kind of bad at some of the things you need to be good at to win games and win important playoff games. There's a big difference between those two things. Moving into the Orlando Magic. Jonathan Isaac, probably going to be the biggest part of this whole conversation here. Not in the way that he's usually a part of conversations online. The 32-25 Orlando Magic are the Eastern Conference 6th seed. They're 8-2 in their last 10 as well. So again, you might look, why are they mid? Well, again, a lot of talent here, a lot of duplicates positionally, in my opinion. A lot of guys who aren't exactly ready to take over the full thing. Paolo hit a game winner against the Pistons last night, or yesterday, but it was really kind of a questionable no call on his travel, and it's the Pistons, so you don't really love to see them barely squeaking out those games. But you're barely getting Anthony Black on the court. You've got real talent on this team, but you don't exactly know who's going to stay, who's going to go. I think that's kind of where I don't trust this team, because I just can tell that there's so much that everyone's competing and they're all wanting to build towards something. This is a good team. This is a playoff team. I just don't know that I can trust it to be an early arrival to the party kind of team. They don't shoot the ball very well either. Defensively, I think they can hold their own in a lot of ways, but they just don't shoot the ball very well, and that'll definitely bite you. Ultimately, my something to look forward to is Jonathan Isaac. Like I said earlier, the change in what his upside can bring for them defensively, I think, could mean the difference between them getting into the playoffs and even winning a round. I think that he's a very, very, very useful utility piece. And even if it's just auditioning for him to be a part of a bigger package to help them move into the future, Jonathan Isaac being healthy, being ready to play with this team, being young, healthy, and kind of exciting, certainly gives the Orlando Magic fans something they have not had in a long time. So even though I say mid, this is just the beginning of a new, beautiful chapter of the Orlando Magic. Similar story here in Indiana. I think you're a little mid, Indy. You're 32 and you're 25. You're the Eastern Conference 7th seed. You're 5-5. Eastern Conference kind of sucks, Indy. You don't play a great defense, Indy. I got to kind of sneeze, but I think I'm good, Indy. Yeah, I'm good. All right. So I originally had them in the too young to call group before deciding that defensively I just couldn't get to a place where that they could be any more than mid, and they haven't really changed my mind. Pascal's been a really good trade, in my opinion. I don't think it's gotten them quite the results they were hoping, but I think that it's the right move for what they're needing to build on. They were able to add in Doug McDermott for essentially nothing during the rest of the transactions on trade deadline night. So I think more than adding a player, it's about development with this team. And then ultimately my thing to look for when it comes to Indiana, what does Rick actually trust about this group? there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of redundancies in ways. You have Siakam, Turner, Halliburton, Mathurin, probably all real locks to get plenty of minutes. But then is it Nembhard? Is it TJ McConnell? Is it Doug McDermott? Is it Obi Toppin? Is it Isaiah Jackson, Ben Shepherd, Aaron Nesmith? There's just a lot of interesting pieces. The young Jarris Walker, who has not played much, probably not, but just he's technically an option. Jalen Smith, or does he even go to a James Johnson because he can't trust anybody that much? Like, this is the thing about Rick that always sort of is a part of the equation with them. And it's what I'll be looking forward to as they start to wind down their season and lock into their playoff roster, because they do play a lot of dudes. And I like that during the regular season. I don't like when guys don't get played during this impossibly long season. Be a good coach, figure it out. Rick does that. But now it's the time for Rick to pull those reins in and get the guys he really needs playing. Moving into it, the Sacramento Kings. I know this one was almost going to look bad because I was ready to call these guys mid a while ago, but came into this season not going to be able to be, held back on the lack of belief in this group defensively. I was like, they have the assets. They can make everything work. They can do what they need to do to make the changes, get the defensive players they need, be a better group, emphasize that. They did nothing, and now they've dumped salary for the Bucks essentially. So, yeah, you're a little relegated here. You didn't really get much better, and it's a little frustrating. I think the thing I'm looking forward to in the finish of the season, does Sasha Vezenkov see his role reduced when he comes back eventually? Does this team sort of just move on from that in their own brains? Because he's added some level of scoring that I'm sure they'll be happy to have back. But could a Chris Duarte be a hotter player at the moment? Could even Keon Ellis maybe get back into the rotation for this? I do find that a little interesting. Or Malik Monk could take a bigger responsibility moving into the playoffs. I find that to be interesting because I think it matters for what their future could look like. But it does feel like the Kings that they've stunned it a little bit, and maybe they didn't choose to be as proactive as they should have been during the deadline, and that'll have to come to a reckoning point in the offseason. The Utah Jazz, this team is probably in their last week, maybe 2 weeks of being a part of this mid-group before they are relegated to our bottom tier that we'll get to in a moment. They're 26-31. They're the Western Conference 11th seed. They're 2-8 over their last 10 games. I had low standards for this group for a little while, but eventually health and lineup changes helped them get into the thick of the playoff chase. And now it seems like they're going to go ahead and paddle their way back to the better luck next year category, because they didn't really blow it up at the trade deadline, but they made the necessary adjustments to start getting younger guys minutes. And that naturally comes with a little bit of losing. So that's something to look forward to this season. You've probably already seen a lot of Keontae George if you've been watching Jazz basketball. Very exciting young player, DFW kid, shout out. But now let's see Taylor Hendricks and Bryce Sensabaugh, two other very interesting kids that they brought in last season, or in the draft this last season, and haven't really seen a lot of minutes this season. And now we're starting to see that they've got great size. They're very interesting players. So even if they're not in the long-term plans of the Utah Jazz, this is a great opportunity for the rest of the league to start being like, hey, what are these guys? And, that's part of where we're going to be for the last few teams we have here. I think we got like a little bit less than 10 teams to go. Finishing with the mid here, we got Houston Rockets. They're going to be 25-31. They're the Western Conference's 12th seed, and they're 3-7 in their last 10. So that's not the ideal place for trying to sneak into the tough playoff race you're in. But I think overall the Houston Rockets are pretty excited with what this season has brought them. They've been mid the whole time, and I still think that that's great for everybody involved. They're a fun, talented team. Sengun is amazing. They're putting together a group around him that feels like it makes sense, that's very useful. A little sad about the Tari Eason loss of a season, essentially. He's been injured most of it. Feels like he would have been a big part of this team being a little bit closer to 500. And really the only reason I didn't relegate this team is because I still think they will fight throughout the rest of the season. I think maybe if a couple of these teams start to fall off or whatever it is, that they could be the team that takes advantage of it. Because like I said, I think Utah starts to come down. Houston comes up into that 11th area. And then it's just a matter of what of the other 10 guys or other 10 teams sort of fall out. My something to look forward to as the season winds down. Well, they need to figure out the Jalen Green situation, both in the interim and in the future. Now, I think the future is probably already figured out. I think there's almost 100% chance he's involved in some sort of trade that brings in something closer to what Houston wants to build into being. But I think perhaps his value is what you want to get up. His confidence is what you want to get up. Maybe you think demoting him won't help because some guys don't take demotions well. But his skill and his talent sort of lend itself to being the most successful in that 6-man capacity. And if he would choose that and to accept that role, it could probably save him in Houston or save his NBA career as a whole, because at this point, he'll probably be just added as a not necessarily a throw-in to a deal, but not the key component to a deal. It'll be similar to the Dennis Smith Jr. involvement in the Kristaps Porzingis trade, where this is a solid piece that we're adding, but we still have to add all the other stuff because it's not enough and not even close enough. You know, this is just a potential upside play that the other team would get. So that is unfortunate, but otherwise Houston, it's been a really interesting season. I think they've built an interesting program to watch moving forward, and I think there's a lot of reason to be excited about that group. Even if this ending of the season is going to be a little boring. All right, we'll finish strong here with our better luck next year teams. There's not a lot of stuff that I'll have to go in depth on with this group, just probably this one alone. So the first team that has a recent demotion is the Atlanta Hawks. They were in my mid category because they weren't, they're 24-32. They're the Eastern Conference 10th seed. They're 5-5. East sucks. So there's really not a reason to write them off just yet. Well, there is now. There wasn't previously. Chicago Light, as I like to call them, survived the rumor mill for most of the season. Didn't really make the moves. No one thought that they were going to make any moves. They didn't make any moves. They teased that they would, but of course they ended up just sort of poking around and seeing what was out there, most likely. Never really getting serious, if I had to guess. And so I like this group because it looked like they were starting to figure out a course that they could build around Trae Young correctly in. Maybe that's changed a bit because now Trae Young's got a finger surgery. He's out for 4 weeks. And Onyeka Okongwu, he's going to be out for a considerable amount of time. Something I didn't know last week. We did mention, but I'm glad I mentioned it because that isn't a significant injury. You get Clint Capella back, but it's like you're taking away 2 of your better players there, getting half of a goodish player back, with Capella probably being minutes restricted to start. So I think this is a very interesting finish to this season. My something to look forward to is, does DeJounte Murray steal Trae Young's team while he's injured? At this point, we don't really know what to believe when it comes to the rumors. I don't know that Atlanta knows what they're even going to do. But it does feel like it's a good possibility that one of the 2 players will be moved in the offseason. This sort of lends itself to being the natural way to get that done. Will it end up happening? That's kind of always going to be the question in these debates. I still feel like they do. But ultimately, I think DeJounte Murray has played much better. Seems like he wants to be in Atlanta. I still don't necessarily hate those 2 guys together moving forward, but to rebuild, to get your assets back, to start thinking about it, it is a time to pick one. And maybe DeJounte provides you something a little bit more consistent to build on than what Trae would do. And Trae obviously would provide you a much bigger asset gain if he was to be moved. So that's why I think it's time to go ahead and say better luck next year to the Atlanta Hawks. Toronto Raptors, you're 21-36. You're the Eastern Conference 12th seed. You're 4-6 in the last 10. This was an initial need a change team, and they actually went the nuclear option for the most part. They did try to get a couple of role players to help this season, but it's pretty much still been looking on the downward slope since the trade deadline. you get enough a good talent in, right? You have RJ Barrett, you have Bruce Brown, you have Emmanuel Quickley, Ochai Agbaji. You got some interesting young talent to move forward with all the deals. So I guess my thing I'm looking forward to for this group, which young players take the pecking order seriously? I mean, Scotty Barnes is pretty much the franchise at this point. That's kind of hard to fix or hard to replace. But do guys start to take a pecking order when it comes to Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett? These are interesting prospects. Still, Barrett's more team controlled. Quickley's looking for a payday. Who takes the reins here and starts to help the Raptors organization figure out exactly what they're going to be moving forward? Because at this point, I think a lot of us are not sure how you would want to build around Scotty Barnes, but you like the group they have, and you just have to see who's serious about it moving forward. Better luck next year, number 3. Yeah. The Charlotte Hornets, 14-42, Eastern Conference 13th seed, and 4-6 in the last 10, which is actually pretty good for where they've been. Now, I have a lot of love for this team right now. I'm very excited to see some of the changes that Charlotte's done just in this season. I think that they're taking things a lot more seriously, but I'm still very concerned with the LaMelo Ball injuries. I'm still concerned with the Mark Williams injuries. And ultimately, that's kind of stuff that's not going to play into this season anyway. I don't know that LaMelo comes back. He could. But after the deadline, you moved on from some players that you weren't really sure about the future with. And now you have a much more cohesive group. You have guys that kind of have more to play for. You're seeing the wins pop up. I've been so excited to watch Vasilije Micic play. I know he's not the craziest box score guy in the world, but I just really love the way that he plays the point guard position. Personally. So it's really been fun to watch him kind of get out and about, play. Trey Mann's been the same way, where it's really been nice to see him blossom with more opportunity. It's a more refocused group, but I still think that, there's going to be teams that will write them off and that they'll underestimate them and they'll be screwed. But I still think ultimately there will be plenty of teams that will be able to beat them even on their bad nights. I guess my thing to look for, this one's pretty goofy. Obviously, I love Micic. Go watch him. Brandon Miller's a hell of a player. Go watch him. But I think what I'm most interested to see, because of what's happening ahead of them, with Chicago and Atlanta, just, for instance, even Toronto to some extent, is there any way they could sneak into the 10th seed? I don't think they could do anything better than that. That would be too hard. Likely the answer is hell no, because they're like 10 games back of the 10th seed right now. Yes, I am advocating that a 14-42 team could potentially still make the play-in. But I don't think it's going to happen because it's like 30 games to play and they're down like 10 games. So basically they would have to be one of the best teams in basketball to finish the season. But if it happens, that would be an incredible story for not only the Charlotte Hornets, but just any general NBA fan would just be like, that's crazy and amazing. So we'll keep looking at it. Who knows? By the time we talk next week, it could be a much, much sadder situation again. Memphis Grizzlies, the most hurt team in basketball this year. Long, strange journey an NBA season is, man. I started with this team and needed change because their best player was suspended. Then he came back. Things weren't perfect, but they looked hopeful. That did not last long because he got a season-ending injury like 2 weeks into that. Okay, cool. Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., doing enough to keep this thing looking good. Maybe they're still a playoff team. Oh, no. Marcus Smart and Desmond Bane are now going to miss massive chunks of the season. Oh, okay. Well, then now this team is just going to do its damnedest to stay in every game, and they do a good job of that. There's one thing about the grit and grind culture is it's lasted a long time and through a lot of different versions of their rosters. It's not easy. It's not easy to handle what they're doing right now, but it's a pretty nice opportunity when you consider the future. You got this season with Vincent Williams has got to blossom. You're not loving everything that's happened with Zaire Williams this season, but you kind of see some stuff. You've got Lamar Stevens has been a fun little asset you've brought in that maybe could be a future piece to make this thing work. And then most importantly, Gigi Jackson has been a smash hit. And these injuries have opened the door for him to be the smash hit that they thought he could be when they stole him in the second round of the draft. I mean, my something to look forward to this season is how good is Gigi? He was one of the top kids in this last class. I think a lot of people freaked out on a lot of reasons. Had he not left early and stayed with his true class, he probably is in the conversation for the number one pick in this year's draft. So in a way, you could be looking at this team bringing back Morant, healthy Smart, healthy Desmond Bane, who they should get relatively soon anyway, with Gigi Jackson and a lottery pick moving into the next part of this chapter in John Morant's Memphis career. Jared Jackson's too. You got to put those two together. And so I, as much as this season's been tough for Memphis, man, I think the silver lining's pretty bright here. And so it's better luck next year, but it might be the best luck of all the teams in this category. Washington. We'll finish. Yeah, the rest of these teams are not good. 9-47, Eastern Conference 14th seed. They're 0-10 in the last 10 games. What else is there to say? Kuzma wants to stay helping the team. That's cool. It makes the team look player friendly that they consulted him or whatever. That's good for the buzz, but it still means a lot more. Kyle Kuzma and Jordan Poole for Wizards fans. So we're not even going to waste a lot of time on the Wizards, man. The something to look for is pretty obvious here. I'm excited to see Bilal Coulibaly and Denny Abdia grow. I think they're talented. It's nice to see Marvin Bagley get an opportunity to revive his career. But what we're looking at is, can Jordan Poole, who is now designated the sixth man of the team, can he pull himself out of what I believe is now going to be considered the worst contract in basketball? It averages at like $32 million a year, and it doesn't come off the books until the 27-28 season, 27 off season, however you want to look at that. That's tough. He's not an awful player, but I do think there's a lot of undisciplined basketball in him. And I think that he, as a talent, was able to overcome that for so long and was with the group that was able to utilize him for the best of what he was capable of. But I think the reality is that now if he wants to continue to have a good career, continue to play basketball at a high level and not just be considered one of these guys who stole money or however they like to talk about these people when they're done, this is his opportunity to thrive in a six-man role, which is something I think his game lends itself to anyway. And I think that this is as dire of a moment for him to get this back on track. You get another offseason in Washington after this. They'll probably have to keep you. So you really don't, and it's not like a team that's got to compete right away or looks like they're going to position themselves to compete anytime soon. So as bad of a contract as it is, it's a team that doesn't exactly have the spotlight on you in the same way that super bad contracts have in the past, right? Like at the Russell Westbrook thing in LA. That was a really big spotlight to have on a really bad contract. So this is a beneficial part of being in Washington. Portland Trailblazers, 15-40, Western Conference 14th seed, 2-8 in their last 10. The two young guards have looked good at moments, but they really haven't got to play together a lot. They're both out right now, so that's Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe, if you're not familiar. Their vets have been keeping them in games, but for the most part, it's not a team that looks like it's really capable of winning many games at all, as you could tell by the record. So let's pretty much just get to the thing that is the elephant in the room right now for Portland, and it's DeAndre Ayton. It's been a tough year, to say the least. It's been a weird year, including snow-in stories and whatnot. But it feels like a negative story about him dropped last week, I think. I think it was last week. And it felt like it was leaked by the Portland Trailblazers. Kind of just shitting on his professionality. And that's pretty concerning, I would say, moving forward. Again, in a similar position to Washington, they don't have to compete for anything right away. They can sort of buy time with his bad contract. But the negativity of the player, whatever that might be, is the thing you were concerned for. So all I need Ayton to do at this point, even if he's kind of done being who he was, he got paid, whatever, even if that's the truth, At this point, I just need him to show up, do his job, and not cause more issues for a team that's already going to have to deal with a lot of adversity, losing so many games in consecutive years like they most likely will. And then at some point, the Blazers will have to decide whether he is too much of a malcontent to handle the losing that is necessary with rebuilding, and if they should take whatever package they can get to move him wherever the hell he'll be happy to play basketball, because it's just the business, man. I don't right or wrong, however you feel about it, this is the business. Better luck next year. Second next team. This team has been better luck next year for a while. Detroit Pistons are 8-48. They're the Eastern Conference 15th seed, and they're 2-8 all around. It's a miracle they don't need their own special tier. But they kind of got better through part of this, and it still hasn't become with a lot of wins. I think that they're probably due for more wins in the second half of the season to where they'll probably, I think, surpass Washington, but probably not San Antonio. So, it's good, better, but not great, obviously. They have more NBA players. That makes it more fun to watch. Cade's back. That makes it more fun to watch. That being said, it's just development time. It's what are we going to get out of Quentin Grimes? What are we going to get out of Simone Fontecchio? Who are the guys we want to stay with moving forward? Is Isaiah Stewart going to stop getting in altercations, or are we going to have to move on from him to have a little less drama in our locker room? Because I like the tough guy stuff when I'm on a competing roster. When I'm not, it's really frustrating. It adds to the fire. Again, not whatever his business. He handles himself how he wants to handle himself. But at the end of the day, this is something extra to add on. But it's not even the thing I'm looking forward to the end of their season. No, the thing I'm looking forward is how long do the Pistons fans put up with Monty Williams? I don't know that the whole world is still watching this story, but I have not stopped. Monty Williams is not well liked at all. I mean, you're talking about the Doc Rivers stuff that we've been making fun of. This is way worse with the Monty Williams Detroit stuff. This Pistons team is probably not even as bad as their record has been, but they're just hilariously coached. Monty Williams has a lot of funny ass opinions on how he wants to talk to the media, handle his young players, and now you got guys in the audience wearing Monty Williams needs to be tried for the all bench lineups, however it is. It's just getting hilarious. It's been a tough one. It's been a tough year for the Pistons fans. You hope that next season brings you a little bit more luck. You get to move on from some of these veterans who are, now you're playing Evan Fournier because why not at this point, So it'll be interesting to see moving forward. Then our final team to wrap up our tiers talk, the San Antonio Spurs. This isn't in any particular reason. There's no right or wrong here. This is just the team that I put in last. In fact, this is probably one of the better teams to watch of all the bad ones. They're 11-46. They're the Western Conference 15th seed, and they're 1-9. They're probably also the team that has the best look coming into next year. They didn't make any big moves. Wembanyama has been advertised, even with the minutes restrictions. He looks like he's going to be able to fight off Chet for the Rookie of the Year award pretty easily. So everything's pretty much good with the first year of the Wembanyama saga. So now pretty much the only thing you have to look forward to is who's going to make their case for staying long term. I don't think Jeremy Shohan is as out as maybe some of the non-Spurs people might think he is, but I don't think it's impossible that he would be moved. Keldon Johnson is certainly a guy where you would be questioning it, but it's really the guards. I think Vassell is probably the only guy that on this roster that I feel confident that there's no way that they would move on from him unless there was some massive trade, maybe a Trae Young trade. But Trey Jones, Malachi Branham, even young Blake Wesley, who's going to try to take the reins here and cement themselves as part of being a part of the Wembanyama dynasty, or whatever version of this success story comes out of the Wembanyama Spurs marriage. Who's going to be here for the long term? Because I think this year has been fun and games for the Spurs. Now they're going to take it super seriously. And then the last question I have with them also is, are they going to cut Marcus Morris? Because that's a very interesting remaining piece to the free agency thing, and we don't know where he's at. So that's the last one I would look for. But either way, we're done here. Thank you again, Hoopla fans. If you enjoyed the content, get yourselves down there, like, subscribe, comment, have a freaking comment war in the freaking bottom. I don't care. Just start going off crazy. Just don't get us kicked off YouTube. You know what I mean? I don't care. Just start ragging on something that doesn't make any sense. Talk to yourself in the chat. It's fine. It's all good for the algorithm.